I'd like to welcome Kathleen Hall here.
Oh. We have competition.
We've got some competition from next door. We're going to need to compete with. So let's sit down. So Kathleen is the corporate vice president of brand, advertising, and research at Microsoft, which, as we all know, is a company. I was going to say undergoing some kind of renaissance and transformation, but I think it's undergone it. I think it's well and truly.
I'm retiring today.
Well and truly out the other side of that. So so we can celebrate that. And I think with Satya, I mean, I was going to say Satya's the new CEO, but he's not really new. How long has Satya been CEO? Satya Nadella.
Almost 5 years, I think.
Almost 5 years, right? So he's not the new CEO of Microsoft any longer, even though we maybe feel he is. And I was out on the campus in Seattle a couple of months ago with a fantastic CEO summit, and it's really impressive to see the transformation in Microsoft. And just from a WPP perspective, one of our new values is being open, and amazing to see how companies which are open succeed more than companies which are closed. And perhaps that talks to some of the topics we're going to talk about today, which is really, I'll tell you the formal title of the panel. So the formal title is Inclusive Marketing, Should Brands Speak to Everyone? I guess the answer is yes. So if we just answer that question, it'll be a very short discussion. But what I'd love to start really talking to Kathleen about is, we talk about inclusive marketing, but marketing only really reflects what a business can do. So maybe Kathleen, you could talk a little bit around why is inclusion or inclusivity important at Microsoft, and what do you do about it in the business?
So I'm going to start with a loop already, because I don't agree that marketing to everyone is what we should do. I think when you market to one, you market to many, and it's the uniqueness of that one sometimes that makes a difference. So for example, the Xbox Adaptive Controller, we weren't marketing to the world, we were marketing to a subset of people who have some challenges with dexterity and playing games. But in doing so, you make a statement to everybody else. So it's just a nuance in you never market to everybody, you market to specific people. And in doing so, you make sure you find ways to resonate with a broader audience. I think that's what we do there. And I think that's what inclusion does. I think on the business side, I'm so glad you asked this question, because I think, D&I is the big kind of topic of the year, I think, here. And a lot of times we talk about the path or the process of inclusion or diversity, and I think we don't talk enough about the outcome and impact. And I think, basically the fundamental outcome of inclusion is better business. It's a better experience. I mean, it's been proven, there's tons of data that shows more diverse teams actually have better outcomes in the long run due to the alternative perspectives that are offered. And we've had tons of examples of this. For one example, we've worked very hard with our agency partners to change the composition of our teams, because our industry is notoriously challenged by this. And the way we did it was very simply with just a reporting system that took a look at what are the layers, like the 4 kind of levels of people in our organizations, and what is our representation by some diverse groups we're interested in. No quotas, no goals, no extra bonuses, just let's all collectively look at this. By simply looking at it, we changed the composition of the team in 3 years to 3 times the industry average. 50% of our senior creatives are women. It's unbelievable. We have a 30% representation of people of color. So, we can affect these changes, but that's not the good news. The good news is when I have a producer who's a female African-American woman who sees African-American talent being styled on the set, and they are miserable, which women can tell when other women are miserable getting their hair done, and goes up to them and says, what's the issue? And they're like, well, I don't style my hair like this. I like my hair natural. And we're like, well, we're women. Let her have her hair the way she wants. We aired the commercial with the women with their natural hair, 2 college students. The immediate response online was, thank you, Microsoft, for representing me as I choose to be with my hair natural. So that affinity and recognition and emotional connection created kind of a social movement, which of course impacted sales. It definitely had people coming to us that had not bought our products before. So that's one example of the outcome of diversity. There's probably 10 examples I could talk about.
And what about how you think about sort of go one stage further back, the design of products, because I remember accessibility was a big issue in technology maybe 10 years ago. My sense is it's not today, right?
Right.
The way we can access devices, voice, other ways has kind of broadened access in a much bigger way.
Yeah, I think, in so many ways initially, technology was viewed as a great equalizer, potentially economically. If we have access and we have training and we can, have work with devices, we can have people have access to opportunity they didn't have before. And then we realize it's a great equalizer in a different way, because with all of the ways you can interact with devices and have various output happen, we could facilitate people who were otherwise underserved. Like when you have everything can be read to you and you're a blind person, that's amazing. We recently had a study that we did, that we had a pool of people and one or two were visually impaired, and they had voice description of the survey. Somebody played for me the voice description of the survey. It took almost 20 minutes because it was a table. And the example was, how much do you like pizza? It was a warm-up question.
Yeah.
And they said, you see a table. It is 4 by 4. The left-hand side says a lot, not very much, somewhat, a little. The right-hand side says pizza this way, pizza that way. And you're like, oh my God, I can't even understand it. So stupid things like how we do surveys, simple things. When we redid it for the visually impaired, it was 3 questions. How much do you like pizza? 3 options, a lot, a little. It was just like these minor changes, but when you think about the point of view of the person who may have the challenge and the potential of the technology, you can adapt very easily. And usually in ways, guess what? Now people can take that survey in their car. We design for one, we benefit many. A mother holding her baby in the kitchen can now participate in the survey with voice because she's too busy to stop and type it into the computer. So it opens up opportunity beyond the person that needed the facilitation. So.
It is interesting because in one level you're right. Like technology has included a lot more people in the world, right? If you think about, I don't know, bank accounts. I was told once you worked on the zip code, right?
Oh yeah, how did you know that?
Oh, we did it. We did our research at WPP.
Oh my gosh, that's going in the way back.
Kathleen worked at Y&R back in the day when Lester Wonderman launched the zip code. We used to say like all marketing is direct marketing, but 2/3 of the world population don't have a postal address. If you don't have a postal address, very hard for someone to send you a bank statement. But once you have a phone, you have a physical address. So for large parts of the world, technology has been very empowering, right? Because you can have access to banking and other services. But for other people, it's less empowering. If government force you to act digitally, my father, aged 85, is going to struggle to fill in a digital tax form, I can assure you.
Right.
So some parts of technology are good, some parts of technology are more problematic.
Right. Right.
So you see the reverse things. When you think about other brands, who do you think does well in this sort of topic?
Well, I saw a lot of great work last night.
Yeah.
Just ironically. The McCann team, I think in Israel, did an amazing job with IKEA. I don't know if you've seen that work, where one of the creative directors is otherwise abled, and he had issue with, for example, getting up and down on a couch because of his disability. And they work with IKEA to do adaptive kind of simple things, like remember in college when you did the risers on your bed so you could shove all your crap underneath your bed? Those kinds of risers.
I think we all struggle to assemble IKEA furniture, to be totally honest.
Yeah, things
pretty
like that.
Fundamental problem.
So you can go to IKEA, you can digitally print out materials that help things be more adaptable, like how to take a cover off a couch. I think work like that just adds that extra level of sensibility. I think for me on the broader scale, I've always been a big admirer of the Dove campaign.
Yeah.
I think when they recognized that beauty doesn't come in one size, one color, one package, and made us feel proud that it didn't, I think that really touched me personally, being a not so svelte, young woman.
We shared some work yesterday. I was at the Inkwell Beach. We shared some work. I did a panel with Gail King on this topic, and we shared some work that we'd done for Dove with Kelly Rowland. And Gail said she grew up in Turkey, and she'd never seen a woman of color in an ad.
Wow.
As a child. And that's probably true of people, by the way, in the US and the UK, right? So even just basic things like casting and representation are critical.
Yeah, I mean, it's social. I feel brands are now responsible for carrying the social mantle and change in the world. And we see impact like that all the time. We did, you're probably familiar with some of the STEM work we've done, encouraging young girls to stay in STEM. And one of the examples, we've kind of peeled apart the problem. Why are not enough women getting hired into technology jobs and not enough are graduating with the right degrees? Why are they not graduating with the right degrees? They're dropping out of STEM courses somewhere between 4th and 8th grade because we desocialize the appropriateness of girls being in science and math. So as we did some, it was just online video, it wasn't big paid media to talk about, girls staying in STEM. One of the things we did was say, hey, we're here, we're waiting for you, we're recruiting 2027. We're gonna, don't be that lonely girl, stick with it, we're gonna be here. And we handed the little girls a little thing that says, we're here, 2027. Well, we got a note from a woman who, as a result of an international divorce, the husband had the 3 girls in Tunisia. And she said, will you do me a favor? Will you write one of those notes to my daughter? I'm like, absolutely. So I write a note and forget about it, right? A month and a half later, I get a note. Dear Big Boss Kathleen. I'm like, best title ever. Thank you so much for your note. I carry it in my notebook to school every day. My Bob's dad, she puts in parentheses, says I can do and be anything I want to be. And you're like, okay, if some girl in Tunisia, but it gets better, is being told by her dad, fast forward, someone lets me know in Tunisia they are learning PowerPoint and Word on paper. They don't have any computers or any software. I'm like, oh my God. I call a friend at HP. I said, can you get us some devices? He's like, oh yeah, sure, we'll get you some devices. I'm thinking 10. I didn't know it. 300 devices show up. We re-image them. We had to go all through kind of government red tape. We get them to Tunisia, working with some partners there. We do a training session for girls, like DigiGirls and Code. And women of all ages and sizes came. So grandmothers, aunts came. And the story was a man walked in because he was not happy that his wife was there, tried to pull her out of the training. A grandmother stands up, whacks him upside the head and said, what man doesn't want his woman to learn? And he slunk out of the meeting. So the point is, like, here we did this little video that like cost nothing, and we're affecting social change in Tunisia. Like that's the value and impact of inclusion.
And then let's talk sort of harder stuff. How do you think about the business impact of inclusion? Is it just the right thing to do, or do you think you can see the results in the business itself?
Yeah, we prove the impact pretty regularly a couple of ways. One, as I have the research team report to me, we spend a lot of time internally proving the impact of advertising and marketing. And we look specifically at the subsegments we push to represent, but then we look at generally, how does that ad compare to other ads that we've done? So, for example, the 2 female college women I was talking about was one of the highest recall ads of the year last year. So that recall then translates into purchase intent translates into sales. So we know it's having business impact. And then beyond that, we always have the balance and fight between product ads and brand ads, right? Everybody has this, how much are we selling versus how much? And we've proven that when we do both, when someone is exposed to our Super Bowl spot with adaptive controller and our hard-hitting Surface, promo spot for $300 off, the purchase intent goes up exponentially when they see both. So that's the value of kind of those diverse stories being told.
And can we talk a bit more about the Super Bowl spot?
Sure.
A little bit more
I love to talk about the Super Bowl spot. Oh, right now,
that.
just talk?
But not everyone. Can we show it? Probably not. Maybe we can see if we can show it. But if we can't show it, maybe tell people that haven't seen it.
So basically, as happens sometimes, products get developed and there's an amazing something about it, but they're not going to be the big share stealer, the big dollar seller. They're not going to be some big financial impact, but it has a big impact on saying who we are and what we stand for. So that was the case with the Xbox Adaptive Controller. The way it came about is we're empowered as part of our culture to see our jobs as a platform. And Satya encourages us to use our platform for good. And a lot of us look around at things that are important to us and decide to take action on them. I have a friend at work who lost a baby to SIDS, and he's literally taken over the collating and analysis through AI of all the SIDS research that has been done across the world, which could never happen before because SIDS is kind of this unknown thing. So that gives you an example of the kind of thing. Well, this particular designer and engineer got together, and a friend of his had been injured in Desert Storm and could no longer game the way he used to game. And he would jigger things. There were duct tape and wires, and they looked at it and said, we can do something about this. So again, the design for one, benefit many, they went off on a path of figuring out what would be a great input and inclusion device for gaming for people with a lot of different disabilities and came up with the adaptive controller. So then we saw that and said, holy mackerel, this thing is really changing the world for a lot of people, because what it basically does is I'm not an other anymore, right? I'm an insider. And for a lot of people that we talk to, gaming is their passion, and they feel like they're their real selves when they're gaming. So we found a real kid, Owen, in Texas, who has an extreme form of spina bifida, who is an avid gamer, passionate about it, and by the way, like a philosopher and savant when you talk to this kid. And we filmed him and a bunch of friends in real life talking about what it means to have this controller and what gaming means to them, and that really became the impetus for the Super Bowl commercial and the theme that, when everybody plays, we all win is the theme. So
and there was something in what you said I thought was interesting around people. as we talked internally at WPP about what our purpose is, why do we exist? What do we need to do to succeed? Is we have to have a sort of a disproportionate share of the best people working at WPP, and they're going to do that. I think if they feel proud of working for the company. And on Monday we announced, for those of you who don't know, you may have had your plastic confiscated on the way in. We're eliminating single-use plastic across WPP by the end of next year, and at one level, we have 3,000 offices. It has an impact in the offices we have. But secondly, I think it says to our people, well, now you have the legitimacy to go and talk to your clients about the same thing. Mm-hmm. And if we have, 15 to 20% of the world's communications being done by WPP agencies, all of a sudden we can have a massive impact around the world on topics that matter. And I think, being selfishly commercial, that matters to the people that work inside the company. It makes the people inside the company, prouder to come to work than they would do necessarily.
Yeah, I think the greatest reward we've had in a lot of the marketing we've done is when the Super Bowl is a good example. I probably got 4,000 emails from employees saying, "Thank you for representing the company I know I work for," because it made it, it makes a difference to them.
You'd have to give them a lot of pay rises to get that impact, right?
No, it's gratification in and of itself.
It is not either or. And so I wanted to show one piece of work, if that's all right. Not a piece of work from Microsoft, but it's work that we're very proud of at WPP that we did for Tommy Hilfiger. And I think it talks to a lot of the issues. Are we ready with it, yeah? So it talks to a lot of the issues that we talked about. One is, inclusivity, but the second is a business opportunity, as well as doing what's right. And thirdly, we've made it in a way that's coherent with what we're trying to do overall. So if you show that, maybe we get out of the way of the screen, let you all watch it. Hang on a sec.
Okay, honey. Here we go. We're the most minority in the world, yet we're not put into any conversation.
Marker.
I learned through having children with special needs that autistic children sometimes don't necessarily have the dexterity to button buttons and zippers. Adaptive clothing for people with disabilities. It had never been done before. So I said, we have to do it.
We wanted to make sure we did this properly. So we need an innovative, creative partner to help us make this happen.
Our role as the agency working with Tommy Hilfiger was to help develop, design, and co-create an entirely new product range for people with disabilities. This is how Tommy Adaptive was born. Our inclusive philosophy led us to first create a platform to work with over 1,500 people from the disability community from all over the world.
Through this design process, together we have created and launched 7 new clothing innovations.
But to be truly inclusive, we had to go beyond the product. So we worked with Amazon to create the first accessible shopping skill for Alexa.
Select option 1. Action.
Our entire design process was inclusive, from our legally blind director to the cast, crew, and influencers. And every piece of marketing was made accessible with descriptive audio and closed captioning.
And the response from our audience has been incredibly positive.
These are going to be life-changing jeans.
I just love it so much.
The access to fashion and the empowerment and self-esteem that it brings should be considered a human right.
Oh.
So I think that's great.
Super cool.
No?
And
Yeah,
the through
super
the
cool,
lines,
no?
it's not just the ad or the video,
No.
it's everything all the way to buying.
All the way through, right? The way we
That's
shot
key.
it, the way, and actually the clothing's cool, right, as well, which is which is really important. So I think we've got some time for questions. So if people have one or two questions, we can talk about those. But if we think about sort of what more we do inside the organisation, what do we need to do to raise this up the agenda inside the corporation?
I think I think what you saw probably works is when you're an individual who has a recognition of an issue, you represent others. So if you elevate it in your own organization, it gains momentum. Like Tommy having experience with an autistic child, or our Xbox person having a friend who couldn't game. Like the things you think are exceptions are actually not exceptions, and I would start to elevate those as opportunities to empower others. Kind of take it personally is my mantra.
Yeah. Do people have other? Who's got a question from the audience? People, yeah.
Hi, Kathleen. I'm Sarah Jenkins from Grey London. Really impressed with your story around how you've changed the diversity of your team. As an industry, I think we've got a lot better at the why around diversity, but the how is really tricky. So I'd love to know what you've done differently to change recruitment and to change up the composition of your team.
Well, when I ask the people on the team, like what makes a difference to them, because I think the diversity part is getting the representation, right? The inclusion part is making sure that people are heard and empowered and impactful. And that is what has been made a difference on our team, that people say, I contribute, I'm equal, I'm heard, I'm valuable. So that, that seems to be the difference in making the transition from diversity being representation to inclusion being impact and empowerment, There's no like program or like that happens because of the culture of listening and wanting the opinions, right?
Yeah, I think I'd add to that. I think one is it's a leadership responsibility. I think secondly, we have to talk to people inside our own organisations and listen to their experiences and understand really what's going on at quite a granular and practical level. And I think that can be quite enlightening to senior executives. I mean, just talking from my own experience, I think we had Monique Nelson, who runs UniWorld, on the panel yesterday. And, she said some things on that panel I hadn't heard before about how she was treated, how she's treated by clients, how sometimes, when the multicultural agency messes up, it's like, you messed up because you're a multicultural agency, whereas when you're a regular agency, you mess up, it's like, well, that's kind of what happens, we'll give you a second chance. So, I think we have to talk to people and really learn and like most problems, if you understand them, you can start to fix them. If you don't understand them, it's quite difficult. So there's that in it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Hi, Kathleen. I'm Logan Moore from Adobe.
Hi.
So one question I kind of have on this is what I see sometimes is these groups get formed for inclusivity or for, or for gay pride or for something like this, and it becomes kind of a smaller niche group that stays involved. How do you drive that kind of change, I guess, at the organization level to keep things, to kind of keep it inclusive, right? Because it feels like sometimes when these groups get started and these initiatives go on, it becomes a core group of people that you almost kind of
they're almost insular in themselves.
Yeah, they're kind of, like a clique.
Yeah, there's a couple things. One is what Mark talked about, which is we make sure we continually make our management team be exposed and aware of the challenges and opportunities with our ERGs, we call them employee resource groups. And it's pretty vocal and it's pretty intense. Like we tell real stories about experiences. We had a transgender woman who had a very hard time changing her name and her credentials and how hard that was, and they wouldn't allow her if it wasn't her legal name change. It's funny, the MasterCard campaign just launched. I don't know if you guys know about this in New York, where, sorry, I digress, but when you're transgender, it is hard to change legally, and you hate if you're Lucy to put Lucas on the counter, like it's uncomfortable. And MasterCard has just made it possible that you can do your true name on the front and back very small is your legal name to keep all the compliance things. Anyway, so I thought that was an amazing adaptation for people. And then a lot of other people hate their names, so a lot of people can do it that are not transgender. So the point is continually raising those issues and challenges and experiences, and I think it goes back to your question too about what else do you do to make it real and comfortable and open for people is a really important thing. The other thing we do is we force, I shouldn't say that word, we encourage allyship and exposure to the ERGs. We make sure that people come to events, hear stories, and look at what we call now intersectionality, right? We don't just do the OLA group and the Blacks at Microsoft and Pride. We do it all together. Like everybody come together and let's all talk about what our issues are. So you just keep working it. It's like a good marketing campaign.
Thank you.
I'm pleased to say that we ran that Possible, where Josh is going to ask the next question, I think came from, we hosted an event for Microsoft marketers doing the same thing and demonstrating kind of the practical challenges that people with disability have. We had coat hangers at knee level and things like that to sort of, people could start to experience, the reality of the challenges. Josh.
Hi, Kathleen.
Hi, Josh.
Could you talk a little bit about how the leadership at Microsoft pushed a learn-it-all culture and how that really lends itself to the work we're seeing and everything we're talking about.
Yeah, what Josh is referring to is we had a history of being a know-it-all culture, and we went to a learn-it-all culture under Satya's regime, under his culture change, and having what we call a growth mindset. And it's one thing to have a change in philosophy like that, but what we really affected was a change in behavior, because the propensity was for people to talk over each other, be the smartest in the room, know the most information from soup to nuts, and the actions literally changed with the philosophy to say, help me understand what you're thinking. Like, where does that come from? Or let people get 3 slides into a presentation before you start ripping it apart. Like, all these practices started to kind of come out as part of this mindset change that Satya embraced. And I think I've said this before, and I'll say it again. I think I had become jaded at 30 plus years in any kind of business that leadership really matters, or that leadership could affect a giant corporation significantly. And then Satya came. And what I saw was, and it's something that I think puts onus back on a lot of us who are managers at any level, is you can affect change. And your attitude, your behavior, your priorities, your philosophies will be absorbed by the team, and that has power. We turned around what could have been a Titanic. Like, it was a major change, and it's real and phenomenal. So I just think it re-energized me as a manager to remember we create the culture we want, and we need to be the example.
Who else has any last questions? Got time for. So what? Let's ask the sort of what one thing do you want to stop hearing on this? Is there one thing you would like to stop hearing on this topic? Or
I think the sort of oblique references to diversity and inclusion, like this hand wave of let's talk about diversity and inclusion, and you're like, well, which part of that? Like your point about, do we talk about the business impact, or the way we affect inclusion, or we have to get specific about it. I'm kind of, I don't know, I'm a little worried that, data was a theme one year, and D&I is a theme the next year, and then women were a theme one year. Like, we kind of have these waves of things, but I hate to have it be sort of surface versus material and sort of deep.
I think it's hard, isn't it, to steer the whole steer through purpose in the right way, because it can be worthy, right? Which is, sometimes a good thing, sometimes not a good thing. It can be superficial, overlaid on top of something else, and it can become contrived. So how do we really drive it into an organization in an authentic way? Which is why I like the examples you talked about making your product more accessible. It kind of gives you legitimacy to talk about it.
Right.
And I think lots of brands stray in this area and kind of overclaim, or it doesn't feel very authentic to consumers, or it won't last really in the long way. There's some things, some products are just kind of functional products for a reason, right?
Yeah, it can't be forced, and you will definitely be called out as being inauthentic. That's why the Tommy Hilfiger, when I saw, I was waiting to see, did it go through retail? Did it go through end to end in what that experience needed to be for someone to actually buy the clothing? That's the authenticity that people are looking for, that it's not just hey, I'm putting on a show and I'm all about this, but I'm really not, No,
good. Very good. Well, thank you very much, Kathleen. It's really great discussion, and everyone have a great week here, and hope we all win some awards. Thank you very much.